Right then, last week Star Trek Discovery, the new TV series, came out in the UK to little to no fanfare, well, at least I was aware of. This was released on Netflix and it's branded as a Netflix original series, but I understand that it's actually on a CBS streaming in America, so I'm not quite sure what the relationship and the setup or funding is for that. We had 2 episodes released as a sort of feature-length pilot, and I've waited a week to try and digest properly the contents of the episodes and how it sort of sits with me, because over in the UK, if you've got Sky or cable, you've got the choice of having pretty much every Star Trek series being shown every night of the week, and so there's not a lot of break between having exposures to these kind of things. I thought the best way to look at it was probably a pros and cons list, in the absence of going through each element individually. So if we start with the pros, a good point is the money and production design. There's clearly been a lot of funding thrown towards this. I mean, all the sets, the costumes, the technology, the special effects, they are all movie quality. The Klingons' designs of their uniforms and their ship, it's all incredibly detailed and none of it feels televisual at all. And that just goes to show that obviously there's a lot of time and effort gone into this, and it hasn't just been cobbled together to try and capitalise on the movie's recent successes, and just an audience that they think will be willing to lap up anything Star Trek related. So that goes towards a lot of it. Whether this is kept up throughout the following 15 episodes, I don't know. A lot of people say that obviously with a pilot you pour all your money into the first few episodes in order to get it commissioned, and then you drift off towards the end with funding. The next pro is the science officer character played by Doug Jones. I can't remember what his species was called, but he's a new species that I didn't recognise. He's sort of like he's like the robot of Star Wars in Rogue One. He's a bit sarcastic, he's very upright, sort of a cross between that robot and C-3PO, in that they're sort of upright, logical but not Vulcan level logical, but just sort of straight-laced people that point out things and don't seem to have many social awarenesses, let's say. They just say things as they are, and he has a lot of the comic relief, if not all of the comic relief, throughout the episode. But he's a good character, and Doug Jones is an excellent actor in or out of makeup, and he adds a lot to the show that would otherwise be very dark and foreboding without his character and his influence there. So that's a good point. The other thing is that the episodes were exciting. They were like watching a mini TV movie. And I think if they just wanted to tweak a little bit at the start or the end, then it could be very, very justifiable that they throw it up at a cinema and have it as a short run as a movie, and they could have released it like that. There's constant tension, and it's got lots of action sequences that are well put together, very cinematic. There's lens flares going off, and it's all adds to the excitement of watching the, I was going to call it films, watching the episodes then. Whether or not they can keep that up, I don't know. Again, we'll have to see. But certainly for these 2 pilot episodes, it is quite gripping, and it does make you want to watch more. The final pro that I could think of when I was really digesting it was that they got creative with the species that you see on board the ship. There's I don't know if it's a male or a female, it might be androgynous, a creature with a computer head that you see in a few shots that's I've never seen before. There's obviously the Doug Jones character again that I don't recognise, and I think there's one other that I wasn't quite sure of whether or not I did recognise them. But either way, it felt fresh and it felt like they hadn't just stalled on the species creation in the Star Trek universe. They've added things to it. I'm sure if you go on a Wikipedia type site, these creatures have been seen in the background of various other shows and episodes, but to me they were forefront and they were interesting to look at, and as a sort of, I suppose, a passing fan rather than a hardcore trekker, it was refreshing to see those characters in there and they didn't just rely on old sort of standby species. Now onto the cons. The Klingons' design, whilst I don't really care that they changed the Klingons' design. They've previously looked like sort of Turkish waiters in the original series. Then they changed for the following 30 years to the standard sort of Lieutenant Worf design that everyone recognises, with the big foreheads and the ridges down it. And that was the change in their look was explained away due to some sort of augmentation virus that went through the Klingon Empire. They sort of retrofitted that in, which was fine. Again, it wouldn't have really mattered, but they did try and pay lip service to it. But now they've obviously just gone along and they've changed the Klingons' design pretty much wholeheartedly. So they are a totally different looking species. The only reason I put this on the con list is, fine, that's what they look like and that's what they're going to be going forward. Okay, but it's jarring. A lot of people know what a Klingon looks like. My mum knows what a Klingon looks like. And when you introduce such an iconic character to the plotline and they look totally different, it takes you out of the film or series or what have you, and it just makes you think. And you think, well, there wasn't anything really wrong with the previous design. If they wanted to make them a new species, such as they could have been the species that Idris Elba's character was using to keep himself alive in Star Trek Beyond, that would have been fine, because they do look a little bit like that. But it just seems a little like they wanted to change them as almost as a point of sort of stamping their mark on the series, and I just found it a bit jarring and it took me out of it. The other con is that it's too overly dramatic, and by that I mean there's too much constant tension. Star Trek isn't a series, well, hasn't been a series of TV shows where there is this constant need for type action all the way through it. Whether it can be wearing, and if you're looking at a series, how can you keep up the pace of having that tension throughout the series? I mean, if they can, great, and it'll be the most sort of hard-boiled series, whether it be science fiction or action or anything, to come out. But I think they might be setting themselves up with a difficult to maintain premise if they try and keep the dramatic tension as on as that. But then it might be a bit like Rogue One, where they wanted it to be a war film, and this is a whole series based around the starting of war with the Klingons, you know, proper. The other thing I didn't like, and I know this is a bit nitpicky, is the divisional colours that they decided on within the Star Trek uniforms. Normally, hang on, sorry, cat got in the way there. With the colours on the uniforms, they tend to have red for command, gold for your engineering and security, and blue for science officers. With this, they seem to have gone for a medal system where they've got gold, silver and bronze, and it just seems a little bit, when you're living in a utopian society in Starfleet, that everyone associates gold, silver and bronze with being first, second and third place. It just seems a little bit like, oh, you're in engineering, are you? Well, you're third place, mate. Whereas, at least with the other system, it was just colours that were associated with a rank. It just seemed a little bit out of place for Starfleet to have chosen such a ranking system. And also, bearing in mind this series sits between Enterprise and the original series, it just seems a bit strange for them to sort of jump between the colouring systems. And again, it was just something that takes you out of it. You're thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, what are their colours? Because they are prominent on the uniforms, and the uniforms look good otherwise, no issue with that. It's just something you really notice. Yeah, the other problem that I think was the biggest one was that they're not actually on the ship Discovery yet. The whole episodes take part on another ship, captained by Michelle Yeoh, and she doesn't make it out of the pilot. Well, yeah, she doesn't make it out of the pilot, but I think she's presumed dead. I think they've obviously built themselves in the option to have her come back at some point later if they want a cameo. But all the crew and all of the ship layout, components, the bridge, you're not invested in it because the ship isn't there at the end. So she's going to go off to a new ship. So it's almost like a pre-pilot pilot. And you do wonder if that's because they hadn't finalised the designs of the ship, or they didn't have the actors in place that they were going to play alongside, and they just wanted to get these pilots out there. It just seemed a little bit strange that they would make sort of an hour and a half long movie that doesn't actually have any elements of what's going to be the ongoing show in it. I'm sure Doug Jones's character is going to come across, but as far as the other members of the crew, you don't get introduced to them, you don't know anything else about them. You don't need to get used to what the ship looks like because you're not going to be looking at it anytime soon. And it just seemed a little bit strange, and I thought, well, why not at least have the Discovery perhaps turn up halfway through, or at least show them on that ship in some capacity, or mention it. There's no reference whatsoever to it. And people are interested to see that kind of thing. They want to know what the new ship looks like. I want to see what it looks like. It's in the opening credits, but there we are. Oh yeah, and the other con was the general setting. I don't know why they set it in the time period that they have. There seems to be this view that people are nostalgic for everything, and therefore you have to try and fill in gaps about stories and tales and things, and nostalgia is best left in the past sometimes. Star Trek's about the future and going forward, and we've seen what technology looks like up to sort of the Next Generation era, so why not have it set further in the future? That way, when they have these holographic people in rooms and that, because that's their new communication, they don't have on screen necessarily, they have people in full-bodied holograms, you can say, oh, this is the Next Generation, we've got rid of the holodeck, and you can actually just project holograms of people into the bridge, and that'd be great. That would be a step forward. You feel the technology is moving on. Instead, it just didn't seem to sit right in this sort of older time frame where they've only just sort of cracked being transporter technology, but now they've got full-body holograms on the deck. It just seemed a bit of a strange choice, and also you're immediately cutting yourself off at the knees as far as to where your story can go, because people will know where the plot starts and finishes, etc. So that just seemed a little bit strange. And then finally, the series as a whole, based off this pilot set of episodes, didn't feel like a Star Trek series as we know it. As far as I'm concerned, the Next Generation is the high watermark for Star Trek episodes. It's where they sort of solidified what Star Trek is and what it stands for. Even in the original series, whilst they had action scenes and it's all very, hokey, they still, at the core, it's about discussing the future and progressing mankind and things like that. It is not a hard-boiled war series. Voyager was a series where you have people trapped on the other side and the whole purpose is to get back. They're not really looking at exploration, but the spirit of exploration was still in it. They would take diversions to encounter other races or help people out and progress in line with the ideals of Starfleet and the core ideas of Star Trek as a whole. And I don't quite know how this is going to get there. Fine, they started a war, it ends up with the main character, Michael, on a prison ship, but I'm not sure how it's going to sit in the canon of Star Trek films. This really seems to sit next to the movies, as opposed to the older series. And you know what, maybe perhaps that era of Star Trek is now done and dusted and people don't want it. I can still go back and I can watch the Next Generation episodes and enjoy every single one, obviously with stinkers in there, but you can go back and watch the series and you can enjoy it and you can go, oh, that's good, that's refreshing. There's quality episodes in there and it is of an episodic nature. And I just wonder, perhaps this is going to follow more of a sort of Netflix streaming type model where you've got the Marvel series like Daredevil and that, where it is an overarching story arc, and you've got to have this high tension now, is how the execs see that you've got to view these series, all the writers. And as I say, if it can keep it up, that's great, but those are my first impressions.